The name they read was mine, not Lucienne Marchand's, though it was her kitchen. Cendre, 2 Michelin stars for 6 years, the coldest and most exacting brigade on the whole northern coast, the one every young cook in the country would have cut off a hand to stand in. Not the name of any of the famous alphas the press had been photographing on the harbor steps all evening. The judge stood at the front of the old customs hall under the chandeliers, with 3 long tables of journalists holding their pens, and he named the cook behind the dish that had finally won Cendre its 3rd star. And the name, he said, was Alba Reyes. June. The Omega Line cook, 26 years old, in a borrowed jacket, standing at the very back where the line cooks are always kept. Lucienne did not look surprised. That is the part I keep returning to. Every other face in that hall turned toward the back, and hers did not. She stood very still at the seat of honor, with the pad of her thumb moving once along the spine of the carbon knife at her hip, the way it had moved 1,000 times across 1,000 nights, while she said to me the only word she ever said, one word, for a whole year, at the pass where the plates went out. Again. I have to back up first, because none of it makes sense told this way. Not the name, not the star, not the way she failed to turn. It only makes sense if you start where I started, at the coldest station of the coldest kitchen on that coast, with a dented tin spoon that had been my mother's, and a one I had spent my whole life teaching myself not to feel. Before I go on, if this story pulls you in, I keep the longer, more uncensored chapters of stories like this on my Patreon, GL After Hours. It's linked in the description and the comments for whenever you want to stay a little longer inside the story. Let me back up. My name is Alba Reyes, but no one had called me Alba in years. In the kitchens, I was June, because I came up through my first brigade in the month of June, a green stagiaire who did not yet know how to hold a knife, and the name stuck the way kitchen names stick. I let it. Alba belonged to a woman who was gone. June belonged to the work. I was an Omega, 26 years old. And for the year this story covers, I worked garde-manger at Cendre, the cold larder, the lowest station in any brigade, the one they hand the newest and the least, where you dress the cold plates and portion the butter and pin the herbs and never once touch the fire that the whole rest of the kitchen is built around. I want you to understand what that station meant, because it shapes everything I did. A great kitchen is a house with a strict order of rooms, and everyone knows which room is theirs before they are old enough to argue. There are the named cooks, the chefs de partie, the ones the guides write down, the ones whose sauces go out under their own authority. And there is the line, the anonymous hands that feed the named ones, so the named ones can be brilliant. I was line. I was useful. And I was invisible in the plain, unhurried way a kitchen values the people who keep it stocked and clean. And I had made my peace with the size of my life. A long time before I ever walked through Cendre's door. A cold station, a sharp knife, a place at the family table before service, where the Omegas and the young ones sit at the far end. I had taught myself very early not to want anything that lived above my station, because in a brigade, wanting above your station is how you get your heart taken out and plated in front of everyone at once. The one thing I owned that was worth owning was a spoon. It was a small tasting spoon of dull tin, dented on one side and worn thin at the lip from 30 years of scraping the bottom of pots, and it had been my mother's. She cooked in a worker's canteen, a long, steam-fogged room where dock hands and factory women ate for a few coins at a scarred counter. And she cooked the way poor cooks cook, which is to say better than most of the famous ones, because when you have nothing, you learn to make everything taste like it was worth showing up for. She taught me at her hip before I could read. She died when I was 14, and the state took the rest, and I went out into the world of kitchens with her tin spoon in my apron and nothing else that was mine. I tasted everything with it. I still do. When my hands did not know what a dish needed, I would touch the worn lip of that spoon to the corner of my mouth, and I would ask her. And often enough, she answered. It is the first thing you need to know about me, because everything I did later, I did as a girl who owned one dented spoon and had trained herself to believe that was the right size for her whole heart. Now let me tell you about Lucienne Marchand, because you cannot understand the year if you do not understand the woman who ran that kitchen like a blade run down a strop. She was 35, an alpha, and she owned Cendre outright in every way that mattered except the money, which is a distinction I will come back to. She had taken a dead oyster warehouse on a cold northern key and turned it into the two-starred restaurant the whole coast measured itself against. And she had done it by being the most exacting person any of us had ever stood near. She was tall, and she moved through a hot, crowded kitchen with an economy that made everyone else look like they were flailing. No wasted step, no wasted word, no wasted breath. She never raised her voice. I want that to land because you have worked for shouters, we all have, and Lucienne was the opposite, and it was worse. When something was wrong, she went quiet, and the quiet traveled down the line ahead of her like a cold front. And by the time she reached your station, you already knew. She had near black hair pulled back so severe it looked like a decision, with a single premature streak of silver at one temple that she never dyed and never tucked away. The one soft human thing she allowed herself, and she wore it like a scar she had decided to keep. Her eyes were a pale celadon green, cold as harbor water in the off-season, and they missed nothing. Her forearms carried old burn scars, ridged and silvered, the way every real cooks do, and she never covered them. And she carried, always, on her right hip, a carbon steel chef's knife, a gyuto, dark and oiled and honed past reason, that had been her own mother's before her. That is the tell you need to learn, the way I learned it, because I am going to bring it back to you a great many times. When Lucienne was thinking, when she was holding something in, when a dish or a person had gone somewhere she had not yet decided how to answer, the pad of her thumb would run once, slowly, along the flat spine of that knife. Not the edge, the spine, as though she were steadying herself against the one thing in the room that had never once disappointed her. She smelled of wood smoke and hot iron, and under it, faint, a thread of bergamot, the way a cold thing sometimes hides a warm thing so far down you have to be very close to find it. I was not close. Line cooks are not close to the chef owner. I knew the scent only from the time she passed behind my station in the crush of service, and I told myself I noticed it the way you notice weather. And I was lying to myself, and I did not yet know it. They called her the Blade of Cendre. The press liked it. She hated it, which of course made them use it more. And she had exactly one word for me, for the whole first stretch of my time in that kitchen. One word she said at the pass, when a plate came up wrong, quiet and final and without heat. Again, I had been at Cendre 11 months before any of this began. And in 11 months, the Blade had said perhaps 40 words to me, and 30 of them were that one. I dressed the cold plates, and I kept my head down, and I did not want anything. And I told myself, content. There was one person who saw through that, and I should tell you about her before I tell you the rest. Because she is the one who names the things the two of us could not. Her name was Odette. She was in her 60s, the pastry chef, and before that, in the years when Cendre was young and rough, its maitre d', the only soul in the building who had been there longer than Lucienne, and the only one who was not afraid of her. She was root-hard and blunt as a cleaver, with flour worked permanently into the lines of her hands, and she had half-raised me without either of us ever calling it that, the way old kitchen hands quietly adopt the strays. She had come up out of the same kind of poor canteen my mother had. She knew what my spoon was without my telling her. On my first week, she watched me taste a sauce with it and said only, "Your mother?" And I said yes, and she said, "Good tool," and went back to her tart shells. And that was the whole of how we became what we became. There was one more, a young one, and she is the reason for everything. Pia was 19, a stagiaire, an unpaid apprentice working for the privilege of standing in that kitchen, all elbows and eagerness and a terror of the chef so total, it made her clumsy at exactly the wrong moments. I liked her. She reminded me of the green June who did not know how to hold a knife. I taught her small things when the named cooks were not watching, how to hold a herb so it did not bruise, how to read a pot by its sound. I did not know, teaching her, that I was lighting a fuse. The pack is always made of small people doing small things at the wrong or the right moment, and you never know which it will be until it has already gone off. So that was my world 11 months in. The cold station, the dented spoon, the invisible line, the quiet woman with the knife who said again and nothing else, the old pastry chef who had adopted me without a word, the terrified girl I was teaching in the corners. I had a life the exact size I believed I was allowed, and I would have kept it that size until I was old, and none of what happened would have happened, except for one Tuesday and a pot of my mother's rice. Let me tell you about the Tuesday. I have gone over it more times than I can count. We ate a family meal before every service. The whole brigade, 20 minutes, one pot of something plain, standing or sitting wherever there was room, before the doors opened and we stopped being people and became the machine. It was the cook's meal, made from whatever the stations were throwing away, and it rotated. And on that Tuesday, it fell to me because the cook whose turn it was had cut his hand on the slicer and gone to be stitched. I made my mother's rice. I did not think about it. That is the thing I want you to understand. There was no plan in it, no reaching above my station, nothing. There was a heel of yesterday's bread, a bowl of good butter I was meant to be portioning, the trimmings of the day's herbs, and one bruised orange from the bar's garnish tray. So I did what my mother did in the canteen when the money ran out 3 days before it should. I browned the butter slow, past gold, until the whole cold larder smelled like the inside of a warm loaf. And I toasted the rice in it until each grain took the color of the butter, and I cooked it down soft. And at the very end, I grated the bruised orange over the top for no reason but that she always did. And it lifted the whole thing the way a window thrown open lifts a shut room. It is a poor woman's dish. It costs almost nothing. It tastes like being fed by someone who loves you and has nothing, which is the only luxury I have ever fully believed in. The brigade ate it standing. Someone said it was good. I did not think anything of it. I put the pot down by the family table and went to set up my station, and that should have been the end of it. One more pot of rice in a life made of that. What happened next was very small. There was a little left in the bottom of the pot, and Pia, 19, terrified, trying to be useful in the 10 minutes before the doors opened, saw the chef standing alone at the pass going over the night's covers, and she did the thing an eager, frightened stagiaire does. She wanted the pot cleared, and the chef looked like she had not eaten. And Pia, in a small panic of helpfulness, spooned the last of the rice into a clean bowl and carried it to Lucienne Marchand at the pass, because there was nowhere else to put it, and she could not bear to just throw good food at the chef's feet. And she set it down at the blade's elbow and fled before she could be told off for it. I saw it happen from my station, and my heart went into my mouth, because you did not bring the chef the family scraps. You did not put a line cook's larder sweepings in front of the woman who had 2 stars and was reaching for a third. I started toward the pass to take it away and apologize and take the blame off Pia. I was 3 steps in when Lucienne picked up the bowl. Time does a strange thing in a kitchen at the top of its game, in the last minutes before service. It goes very fast and very slow at once. The whole room held breath. I remember it slow. I remember the steam off the bowl. I remember she did not look up at first. She picked up the spoon out of habit, the way a chef tastes 40 things a night without stopping her thinking. And she brought a little of my mother's rice to the corner of her mouth, and she went to set the bowl down again, already turning back to the covers. And then she stopped. She stopped the way you stop when you hear your own name called across a crowded street. The whole line of her went still. The contained, economical body that never wasted emotion simply arrested, mid-turn, the bowl halfway back to the pass.
If this story stayed with you, hit subscribe so the next one can find you. Stay close.
And I watched, from 3 steps away, with my apology dying in my mouth, as the pad of her thumb came up and ran once, slowly, along the spine of the carbon knife at her hip. She tasted it again, properly this time, slowly, the way you taste a thing you are trying to take apart, to find the bones of it, to understand how a heel of bread and a bruised orange and a bowl of browned butter had reached into the most decorated kitchen on the coast and grabbed her by the throat. Her pale eyes came up off the covers and found me. She knew whose station the family meal had come from. Of course she knew. She knew everything that moved in her kitchen. And she looked at me across those 3 steps for a length of time that was probably 2 seconds and has lasted, in me, considerably longer. And she said one word. Again, I thought I was being told the dish was wrong. That is the thing you have to understand about being the kind of person I had made myself. Again was the word she said at the pass when a plate failed. Quiet, final, do it over. It is not good enough. So when the Blade of Cendre looked at me over a bowl of my dead mother's rice and said again, the whole trained architecture of my smallness heard this is not good enough. And I said, yes, chef. And I lowered my eyes, and I turned to go back to my cold station, my face hot with a shame I could not have explained, because I had let my mother's canteen rice be carried in front of a great chef, and it had, of course, not been good enough. I had it exactly backward. It would be months before I understood how exactly backward I had it. She had not said do it over because it failed. She had said do it again because I need to be sure I felt what I just felt. The only way a woman built like a blade knows how to ask for a thing to happen twice. But I did not know that yet, and so I carried the wrong meaning home with me and lay awake under it, and that misreading is the seed of the whole year. The doors opened, service happened, 4 hours of it, controlled violence, the machine running hot. And somewhere in the middle of it, in the crush and the heat and the calling of tickets, with sweat running and the pan screaming and the whole line moving as one animal, Lucienne came down the line to check a plate, and she passed close behind my station the way she had 100 times. And it hit me. The scent pull. If you have felt it, you know I cannot describe it. And if you have not, I cannot make you believe it. Wood smoke and hot iron, and under it, that thread of bergamot. But this time it did not pass me like weather. This time it reached in under my ribs and took hold. A low sure pull toward her. The fated thing. The thing the old cooks in my mother's canteen used to talk about in low voices, as though it were half a blessing and half a sentence. My hands kept working. I want you to know my hands kept working. A line cook's hands do not stop for anything the heart is doing. But something in me had turned toward Lucienne Marchand, like a plant turning in the dark toward a light it cannot see, and I understood, standing at the coldest station in that hot kitchen with my mother's spoon in my apron, that I was in a great deal of trouble. And here is the thing I understood second, later that same night, cleaning down my station at 1 a.m. with the rest of the exhausted brigade. The thing that frightened me more than the pull. She had felt something over that rice. But she had known my station. She had known without asking whose family meal it was. And when I let my mind run back over 11 months, I found 100 small things I had filed as nothing and now could not unsee. That the herbs I pinned always seemed to end up on the plates she garnished herself. That twice she had changed a cold garnish on the menu to the exact cut I favored without ever saying a word to me. That on the worst night of my first winter, when I had burned my wrist badly on a sheet tray and said nothing because line cooks say nothing, a jar of the proper burn salve had appeared in my station drawer the next day, and no one ever admitted to putting it there. I had a faint old scar on that wrist from before I ever came to Cendre, and now I had a fainter one from that night, and I stood cleaning my station and understood that the Blade of Cendre had been paying attention to the Omega line cook for a great deal longer than the Omega line cook had been paying attention to her. Why? I did not know. I did not dare to guess. I went home and lay awake, and I did not take out my spoon to ask my mother, because I was afraid of what she would say. The next day, she called me to the cold room. You should know what it means to be called to the cold room, so you feel it the way I felt it. The walk-in cold room at the back of Cendre was the one place in the building with a door that shut, and no windows, and no one else. And being called there by the chef meant one of 2 things. You were being taught something too important to say on the line, or you were being ended somewhere the brigade could not watch. I had never been taught anything too important to say on the line. So I walked to the cold room the next afternoon, in the dead hour between prep and service, certain I was being fired, for the rice, for letting it be carried to her, for whatever she had seen in my face during service that I had not managed to hide. She was waiting for me between the shelves of racked fish and hanging herbs, in the cold white light, with her arms folded and her thumb, I noticed, resting still against the spine of the knife. She did not waste time. She never wasted anything. "The rice," she said. "Where did it come from?" "My mother, chef," I said. "A canteen dish. I'm sorry it was brought to you. It wasn't meant." "I did not ask you to apologize," she said. "I asked where it came from." And when I did not have anything to add to my mother, she was quiet for a moment, the cold room humming, her pale eyes going over my face the way they went over a plate. Not unkindly, but completely, missing nothing. "It was the best thing I have tasted in this building in 2 years," she said. "And I have built this building on the best things. I did not know what to do with that. There is no training in the whole long apprenticeship of a line cook for the chef owner telling you your dead mother's canteen rice is the best thing in her 2-starred house." I stood there in the cold and said nothing, because nothing was the only thing I knew how to say from where I stood. Then she set the condition, and the condition changed my life. "I want the 3rd star," she said flatly, the way she said everything true. "I have wanted it for 6 years. I am close, and I have been stuck, because a 3rd star is not a better version of a good dish. It is a soul, and you cannot cook a soul from technique, and I have all the technique on this coast and no soul left to spend." She unfolded her arms. "You have soul and no technique. You have never worked a hot station in your life. You do not know a tenth of what my named cooks know." A pause. "And you cooked 1 bowl of rice that did more than anything my named cooks have plated in a year." "Here is what will happen," she said. "You will keep your station. You will dress the cold plates by day, and no one will know anything has changed. And at night, after service, when the brigade has gone, you will stay, and you will cook a station of the tasting menu with me, 1 dish at a time. Your food made right, your soul my hands, until it is worthy of the room. You will make it, and it will be wrong, and you will make it again, and it will be wrong, and you will make it again until it is not wrong. And you will tell no one, not Odette, not the girl you teach in the corners, no one. Do you understand me?" I understood her, and I want to tell you that I asked her why. Why the secret? Why the Omega line cook? Why not simply promote me to a hot station in the light where the whole brigade could see? But I did not ask that first day, because I was a person who had trained herself out of asking for explanations, and because some cowardly grateful part of me was so undone at being wanted for anything at all that I would have agreed to it in the dark on any terms. That not asking cost us both a great deal later. I have thought about it since. So much of what went wrong between Lucienne and me went wrong in the spaces where neither of us asked the other a plain question. Each of us so practiced at going without that we forgot other people might give. If only you let them see you want. But I did set 1 condition of my own, and I am prouder of it than of almost anything I did that year, because it was the first thing I had wanted out loud in a decade. "If I cook it," I said, and my voice did not shake, "it stays mine, not on the menu. I know it can't be. I'm garde-manger, I understand. But between us, you don't take my mother's food and make it yours and forget where it came from. Whatever we make in here at night, I made it, even if no one ever knows. You will know. That's my condition, chef." She looked at me for a long moment in the cold white light, and then the pad of her thumb moved once along the spine of the knife, and something happened at the corner of her mouth that on another face would have been the beginning of a smile, and on hers was simply a decision reached. "Agreed," she said, and then, quieter, as I turned to go, again, only this time I heard, underneath it for the first time, that it was not a correction at all. It was closer to a promise. "Come back, do this again, tomorrow night, and the night after that. Again." The first month passed in a kind of doubled life, and I lived it the way you live a secret, half in dread of it ending and half unable to believe it had begun. By day, I was June, garde-manger, invisible, pinning herbs and portioning butter, and lowering my eyes when the chef passed. And at night, after the last of the brigade had banged out into the cold, and the building had gone quiet and ticking as it cooled, I stayed and it was only Lucienne and me and one lamp burning over the pass and the whole dark kitchen hours. We built a dish out of my mother's rice, not the canteen bowl, but its soul lifted into the language of a great restaurant, browned butter and orange, and something of the sea from that cold coast worked in. And it was wrong, and I made it again. And it was wrong, and I made it again. And she stood at my shoulder and said the word. And the word had stopped meaning you failed and started meaning closer. Keep going. I am still here. I began in those nights to catalog her. You do that when you love someone you have decided you are not allowed to love. You cannot have the whole of her, so you keep the pieces. I cataloged that she tasted with a battered old spoon of her own, steel not tin, and that she touched its lip to the corner of her mouth the exact way I touched mine, so that some nights we stood at the pass, tasting from our two worn spoons like two people praying at the same small altar. I cataloged the streak of silver at her temple, and how it caught the lamp when she bent over a plate. I cataloged the thumb on the spine of the knife, which I now understood was not a habit, but a language, the thing she did instead of everything she did not let herself say. And I cataloged the scent, wood smoke, and hot iron, and that low thread of bergamot, which reached for me every single night now, and which I answered with my whole traitor body while I kept my hands working and my face still. Odette knew something had changed before I said a word, because Odette knew everything. And one afternoon in the second week, she cornered me by the proofing oven with flour on her hands and no patience in her face. "You've gone lit up from the inside like a lamp with the shade off," she said. "And the chef hasn't looked that awake since before she started chasing that third star like it owed her money." She wiped her hands. "You want to tell me what you're doing in this building after the rest of us have gone home? Or do you want to keep lying to the one person here who's on your side?" I had promised to tell no one, so I told her nothing, and it was the wrong choice, and I made it out of loyalty to Lucienne, and Odette let me make it. She only looked at me a long moment with those root-hard eyes, and then she said the first of the true things she would say to me that year. The things neither Lucienne nor I could say to each other. "That woman doesn't feed people, child," she said. "In 40 years, I have watched her cook for kings and critics and never once feed a soul. She plates, she performs, she wins. Feeding is different. Feeding is what your mother did in her canteen, what you did with that pot of rice." She picked up her tray. "So you go and ask yourself why the Blade of Cendre is suddenly, secretly, in the dark where no one can see, learning how to feed one single person. And then you ask yourself, who?" She left me there, with the proofing oven ticking, and a question I was not brave enough to hold. By the second month, our dish had gone onto the tasting menu. I want to be careful about how I tell you this because it is the shape of the whole thing. Lucienne did not put my name on it. She could not. A garde-manger cook does not have a dish on the tasting menu of a 2-star restaurant. The brigade would have come apart. The named cooks would have revolted. And above all, Beatrix Vane would have started asking questions I did not yet know we had to fear. So the dish went out under the house, unattributed, as everything at Cendre went out under the house, and the critics who came in those months began, quietly, to write that something had shifted at Cendre, that there was a new warmth in the cold precision, a soul where there had only been technique. They credited the Blade. Of course they credited the Blade. And every night in the dark, she and I made the next one and the next, my food climbing dish by dish onto the most celebrated menu on the coast, wearing no name at all. And I told myself I did not mind, because I had asked only that she know and she knew. But I want to tell you about the small object from that month, because the small objects are the ones that turned out to matter. It was a second stool. For the first weeks, I had stood at the pass through those night sessions, because line cooks stand, and one night in the second month I came in after service, and there were 2 stools at the pass where there had always been one. She did not mention it. She never mentioned any of it. She simply sat on one, and after a while of my standing, she looked at the empty one, and then at me once, and I sat. And we worked the rest of that night side by side on 2 stools at the pass, with one lamp burning, close enough that when she reached across me for the salt, her forearm passed a hand's width from mine, and neither of us moved, and the whole dark kitchen held still around that hand's width of nothing. That is the thing about a restraint you have both chosen without ever agreeing to it out loud. It is built out of hand's width. It is built out of the reach that stops short, the forearm that passes and does not touch, the two spoons at the same altar that never once cross. I could have closed that hand's width any night. I understood by the second month that she could have two. Neither of us did. We sat on our two stools and made my mother's food into art and kept a perimeter neither of us had drawn. And it was the most intimate thing I had ever been part of. And no one watching through the window could have made a single word of scandal out of it. On the 9th night of the 3rd month, she taught me the knife. I had never worked a hot station, I told you that, and there were motions my hands did not know. And one of them was a particular rocking cut she used that I could not get right no matter how many times I made the dish again. And that night, she came around behind my stool, and she reached over my shoulder, and she put her hand over the back of my hand on the handle of her own carbon knife, the gyuto, her mother's, the one thing in the world she trusted. And she moved my hand through the cut, once, slow, her palm warm over the back of my fingers, and her jaw a hand's width from my cheek. The kitchen was very quiet. Her scent was all around me, wood smoke and iron and bergamot, and her hand was over mine on her mother's knife, and I could feel the care in it, the terrible held care of a woman moving another woman's hand through emotion as though it were the most fragile thing she had ever handled. And for the length of that one slow cut, the whole perimeter we had built trembled like a wire. And then the cut was done, and she took her hand back, and she straightened, and she said from behind me, "Lo," again. And I did it alone, and it was right. And neither of us said anything about the hand or the hand's width, or the way I had gone still under it. But I put her knife down after, and I looked at it, the dark oiled carbon of it, and I understood that she had just let the Omega line cook hold the one thing she trusted, guided by her own hand, and that this was as close to a confession as a woman built like a blade knew how to come. Odette found me the next day with my thoughts still full of that cut, and she did not ask what had happened. She only looked at my face and knew that something had. "I raised you better than to break your own heart on purpose," she said, which was not fair and was completely fair. "You know what that is, what's happening in the dark in there. You've known since the rice. You're just too poor in the pocket and too poor in the practice of being wanted to say the word for it out loud." She set down her rolling pin. "I'll say it then, since neither of you high-born fools will. That's a fated bond you're sitting on two stools next to every night and calling a cooking lesson. And a bond doesn't care that she owns the building and you own a spoon. The only thing a bond has ever cared about is whether the two people carrying it are brave enough to stop pretending. And you, child, are the two bravest hands I ever taught, and the biggest coward I ever met, both at once." I told her she didn't understand. I told her there were reasons. The brigade, the menu, the star. I was not lying exactly, but I was using the true reasons to hide from the truer one, which was that I was an orphan with one tin spoon who had spent her whole life being told what was precious and what was not, and I could not make myself believe I was allowed to be the precious thing in the story instead of the useful one. Odette heard all of that in what I did not say. She always did. "Have it your way," she said, "but there's weather coming into that kitchen, and it has a name, and the name is Vane. And when it gets here, the two of you being brave a year too late won't do either of you any good at all." I should tell you about Beatrix Vane, because Odette was right, and the weather was already on its way. Cendre was Lucienne's in every way but the money. When she had taken the dead oyster warehouse and needed the capital to make it into what it became, the capital had come from Beatrix Vane, a rich alpha, an investor with a portfolio of great rooms across 3 cities, a woman who collected restaurants the way some people collect paintings, for the prestige and the return. Beatrix held the majority stake in Cendre. She was not a cook. She had never dressed a plate in her life. but she owned the larger share of the building I bled in, and she came north 4 times a year in a long, dark coat that cost more than I made in 2, and she walked the dining room like a landlord walking a property. And she and Lucienne spoke in the flat, careful voices of 2 people who need each other and do not like each other at all. Beatrix wanted the 3rd star, the same as Lucienne, but she wanted it the way you want a stock to split, and she had ideas about how to get it that had nothing to do with browned butter and everything to do with what she called the story. And in the 5th month, Beatrix started coming to the pass. She came on a slow Tuesday, in the dead hour, when she thought the building was empty except for the chef. And it very nearly was, except that I was in the cold room fetching the fish for that night's session, and the cold room door does not shut all the way, and I heard the whole of it. I have never told Lucienne that I heard it. I am telling you, the guides love a marriage of names, Lucienne, Beatrix said, in that flat, expensive voice. You know they do. 2 great alphas, 2 great kitchens, 1 bonded house. It's the story that gets written up in every paper on the continent, and the 3rd star follows the story as often as it follows the food. Margot Sorel is willing. She has the celebrity, the cameras, the 2nd star of her own, and she has made it very clear she would bond into Cendre and bring all of it with her. It is the cleanest path to the 3rd star you will ever be offered, and it is sitting in front of you, and all you have to do is want it. There was a silence, and in the silence I could see, without seeing, the pad of Lucienne's thumb moving once along the spine of the knife. And the other thing, Beatrix went on, and her voice changed, went casual in the way that is never casual. There is talk in the brigade that you have been keeping late hours with a guard manger cook, an Omega, the Reyes girl. I am sure it is nothing. I am sure it is exactly the eccentric mentorship you'll tell me it is. But understand me, Lucienne. A house chasing a 3rd star cannot have a story like that attached to it. It is the wrong story. It costs and it does not return. Whatever it is, end it. Bond Margot, cut the line cook loose to some warm little bistro where she'll be happy, and take your star. That is the whole of my advice, and I own the larger half of the reasons you should take it. I stood in the cold room with the fish going warm in my hands, and I understood 3 things at once. And I want to give them to you in the order they arrived, because the order is the whole of who I was. The first thing I understood was that I was a danger to her, not a scandal in myself. An orphan with 1 spoon is not a scandal. There is nothing there to bring down, but a lever, a soft place the majority owner could press to move the chef where she wanted her. Beatrix did not care about me at all. She cared that I was the one thing Lucienne wanted that Beatrix could take away, and that made me the most useful tool in the building for a woman who moved people like stock. The second thing I understood was that Lucienne had known this since the rice, that the secrecy had never been shame. It had been a shield. She had put me at the pass in the dark, unnamed, unseen, precisely because she had understood from the first bowl exactly what I was and exactly how easily this weather would take me from her if it ever saw me in the light. Every hand's width she had held, every reach that stopped short, every night she had let me hold her mother's knife and taken her hand back. She had been standing between me and Beatrix Vane the only way the world allowed, by refusing to let anyone, including me, see what I was to her. And the third thing I understood, standing in the cold with my heart going like a service ticket printer, was that she was about to lose the thing she had wanted for 6 years, and the only clean way to save it was to let me go and bond a stranger, and that she had not, in the whole of that meeting, said yes to any of it. She had let the pad of her thumb answer for her, and I did not yet know how to read that silence, and it would take a crisis to teach me. The crisis came faster than any of us were ready for, because that is how they come. Word reached the kitchen, through the particular grapevine that great restaurants have, that the Michelin inspectors were in the city. Not a rumor of a rumor. The real thing, 2 of them, moving quietly through the top rooms on the coast. And everyone in our world understood that the 3rd star, if it came at all, would be decided in the next handful of nights. Lucienne went very quiet and very precise, the way a blade goes quiet before it is used. The whole brigade knew what was riding on the service. And Beatrix Vane, who could smell a decision the way I could smell browned butter, came north again to be there when it happened, in her long dark coat, to make sure the story went the way she had priced it. And she made her move on the afternoon before the night we were all certain the inspectors would come. She did it cleanly, the way people with money do things, which is to say she did it as a kindness. She had me brought to the small office off the dining room. Not the cold room, the office, the place where the business of the building was done. And Lucienne was not there, and I understood at once that this was on purpose, that I had been separated from the chef the way you separate one animal from the herd. "Sit down, Miss Reyes," Beatrix said, and she did not sit. "I want to help you, and I want you to hear that I mean it. You are a gifted cook. Odette says it, the critics have felt it without knowing its name, and I am not a fool. I know exactly whose soul has been going out on that tasting menu under this house's name for 5 months. You have made Lucienne's kitchen warm. It is the most valuable thing anyone has done for this building since I bought into it." She let that sit. "Which is precisely why I am going to give you something, and you are going to be wise enough to take it." She named a restaurant. A good one, warm, well-reviewed, in a softer city to the south. A place where an omega-line cook with soul and no name could be made a chef de partie tomorrow, in the light, with her own dishes under her own hand. It was more than my kind has ever offered. It was the exact size of the life I had spent my whole existence believing I was allowed, handed to me on a plate, and all I had to do to take it was leave. "Lucienne will bond Margot Sorel," Beatrix said gently, as though breaking soft news. "The house will get its 3rd star on the story of 2 great alphas, and you will finally get to cook your own food with your own name on it, somewhere far from all of this, where no one will ever use you to break a woman you were foolish enough to fall for. Everyone wins, Miss Reyes." "I am offering everyone a way to win. The only person who can turn that into a tragedy is you." I asked for the night to think, and she gave it to me, because she was certain of me, because she had read me exactly as I had spent my whole life training the world to read me, as a useful thing that would, in the end, take the safe offer and be grateful. I did not go home. I went to the cold room, the only place in the building with a door that shut, and I stood between the racked fish and the hanging herbs where Lucienne had first told me my mother's rice was the best thing in her house, and I took out my mother's spoon and I held it and I asked her, the way I had asked her 1,000 times, and this time she answered plainly. Here is what I saw, standing in the cold with the spoon in my hand. If I stayed and fought for her, I did not win her a star. I lost her one. I was the wrong story. Beatrix was right about that coldly, entirely right. A house chasing its 3rd star could not carry an omega-line cook and a fated bond in the light, not against the clean, marketable marriage of 2 famous alphas. If I loved Lucienne, and I did, I had for months, I had stopped being able to pretend otherwise the night her hand covered mine on her mother's knife. Then the loving thing, the thing that put her before me, was to take Beatrix's kindness and disappear and let the woman I loved have the 6-year dream I could only cost her. That is what a lifetime of being the useful one and never the chosen one teaches you to conclude, that your leaving is the gift, that the highest form of your love is your absence. But I did not go to Beatrix. I went to Lucienne. And I want to tell you why, because it is the one moment in the whole year I did the harder, more honest thing, instead of the smaller, safer one, and everything turned on it. I could have simply taken the offer and vanished south and left a note. That would have been the coward's mercy, to save her the star by removing myself, and to never make her look at the cost, to let her wake one morning to a bonding with a stranger and an empty stool at the pass and never have to choose anything at all. It is what the old June would have done, slip out at gray light, leave the perimeter intact, spare everyone the scene. But somewhere in that cold room, with my mother's spoon in my hand, I understood that leaving in silence was just one more way of deciding for her, of doing to Lucienne exactly what Beatrix did, exactly what the whole world had always done to me, looking at a person and concluding, without asking, what she was allowed to want. If I loved her, I did not get to choose her sacrifice for her in the dark. I had to stand in front of her and tell her the true and terrible shape of it, and let her choose with her eyes open. Even if she chose the star, even if she chose to let me go. So that night, after the brigade had gone, I stayed. And when she came to the pass with the lamp and the 2 stools and her mother's knife, I did not sit down. I heard Beatrix, I said, in the office and in the cold room months ago. I know about Margot Sorel. I know I'm the wrong story. I know what I cost you. She went very still. The pad of her thumb came up to the spine of the knife, and for once I did not need to guess what the stillness held, because I had learned her for a year, and I knew it was fear. She offered me a kitchen in the south, I said. My own dishes, my own name. In the light. It's more than I was ever going to get. And I'm going to take it, chef. I'm going to take it and go, and you're going to bond Margot and get your 3rd star, and this house is going to have the story it needs. I'm not telling you this to make you talk me out of it. I'm telling you because I'm not going to do it the way she wants me to. I'm not going to just disappear and leave you to wake up to it. You gave me the one thing no one ever gave me, which is that you told me my food was mine. And you let me choose my own terms. So I'm giving it back. I'm choosing this. To leave. So you can have the thing you've wanted for 6 years. That's mine to give. And I'm giving it. And I need you to let me. I had it all planned. I had the whole speech, the noble exit, the useful girl making herself useful one last time by getting out of the way of the great woman's dream. And I want you to understand, I meant it. It was the most honest and least cowardly thing I had ever tried to do. I was going to save her by leaving, and I was going to do it to her face instead of behind her back, and I thought that was the bravest love had in it. And Lucienne Marchand looked at me across the pass in the lamplight, with her thumb going still on the spine of the knife, and she said the thing that took the whole year apart and put it back together right. You have it backwards, she said. You have had it backwards since the rice. She came around the pass, the contained, economical body crossing the small distance it had never once crossed, and she stopped in front of me, closer than she had ever stood. Close enough that I could see the lamp caught in the silver at her temple, and the pale water green of her eyes gone dark. And for the first time in a year, she did not touch the knife at all. Her hands stayed at her sides, open, on purpose, the way you hold your hands when you have decided to stop defending yourself. I never wanted the star more than I wanted to keep you safe, she said. Understand what I'm telling you. The secrecy was never shame. From the first night, I knew what you were to me. I have known a fated bond when it walked into my kitchen, since long before you let yourself feel it. And I knew, the same hour, exactly how fast this world would take you from me if it ever saw it. Beatrix owns the larger half of everything but this. So I hid it. I put you at the pass in the dark, and I held every inch of distance between us with both hands. Not because I did not want to close it, but because the moment anyone saw me want you, you became the thing they could break me with. Every night I did not reach across that distance. I was standing between you and her. That was the only way the world let me love you. So I did it. For a year. And I let you think the word was a correction because if you knew what it really was, you would not have been able to hide it either. And then you would not have been safe. I could not speak. She went on, quiet and exact, refusing to spare either of us. And here's the part you have backward. You think you are the cost of the star. You are the star. Your food is the soul I could not cook in 6 years of trying. I have been putting your dishes in front of those inspectors for 5 months. Not the houses, yours, I know exactly whose they are. And I have been putting your name forward too, quietly, in every place a name can be put forward, so that if the 3rd star ever came, it would come attached to Alba Reyes and not be swallowed by this house. I was never going to let you go and bond a stranger for a marketable story. I was going to win the star with your soul, and then I was going to stand in whatever light the star made and finally, safely, tell the truth. I only needed a little more time. And now you are standing here trying to give me your leaving as a gift. And I am telling you, it is the one thing in the world I will not take. Do you understand me? You understand what I am asking, she said, because she could not help being exact even here. I cannot give you safe. Beatrix is real. The cost is real. If you stay, she may take her money, and this building may fall. And there may be no star at all, and no Cendre, and nothing but 2 cooks and a spoon and a knife. I will not lie to you the way everyone has always lied to you, with a small, safe promise. I am not offering you safe. I am offering you the truth out loud, in the light, whatever it costs, and I am asking you to be mine in front of all of them, and let it cost what it costs. And you can still say no. That door is open. I am holding it open on purpose. I will not decide for you, the way she did, the way everyone always has. Choose. And I understood that she was doing the single hardest thing a woman built like a blade could do. She was standing in front of me with her hands open and the knife untouched, refusing to save me by deciding for me, letting the Omega line cook make her own choice, even if the choice broke everything, because she had understood, in a way Beatrix never would, that choosing for me was just one more powerful person telling the useful girl what she was allowed to want. I thought of every door in my life that had shut before I could reach it. I thought of my mother's canteen and her tin spoon at the corner of my mouth, and a lifetime of concluding that my leaving was the most I had to give. And here was a woman holding a door open on purpose, with the last thing she trusted lying untouched on the path between us, waiting to see if the orphan with 1 spoon could believe, finally, that she was the precious thing and not the useful one. I did not have to be brave. I only had to stop being afraid of wanting. I closed the distance she had held for a year. I put my hand to her jaw, the first time in 12 months I had touched her by choice, my palm along the line of her jaw and my thumb at the corner of her mouth where a cook's whole world is decided. And I put my forehead against hers, and I felt the breath go out of her all at once. The whole held blade of her finally setting itself down. And she kissed me once, careful, the way she did everything, as though a year of held distance had been leading to exactly this and nothing else. And when she drew back, with her forehead still against mine, and her hands at last coming up to hold me, she said the word, the only word she had said to me for a year, the word I had wept over as a correction and learned as a promise, and she said it now soft, into the hand's width of nothing that was finally nothing, into a distance that no longer needed holding. Again, she said. And I kissed her again, and I understood the whole word at last. I will not pretend the weeks that followed were simple, because they were not, and I promised you I would not lie the way the small safe promises lie. Beatrix Vane did exactly what a woman who moves people like stock does when a person refuses to be moved. She threatened to pull her money, and for a bad gray fortnight, it looked as though there would be no Cendre at all. But Lucienne did the thing she had been too afraid to do for 6 years, which was stop letting the majority owner set the terms of her own kitchen. She stood in that office and told Beatrix Vane the truth out loud, that the soul the critics had felt was mine, that the marketable marriage was a corpse of a plan built on a lie, and that a house cannot chase a soul while selling the cook who has one. And she called Beatrix's bluff, because it was a bluff. A woman who collects restaurants does not set fire to the one that is finally about to earn its 3rd star. Beatrix kept her money, because keeping it was the profitable thing. And she never came to the pass again. And she never looked at me again. And I found I could live very easily with being unseen by Beatrix Vane. Odette, who had known before either of us, moved my small things up to the chef's own corner of the pass without being asked. And when I tried to thank her, she told me she had spent a year waiting for the 2 bravest hands and the 2 biggest cowards she ever met to stop wasting her time. And then she turned back to her tart shells too quickly. And I understood that Odette, who had not let anyone see her weep in 40 years, was not going to start in front of me. The inspectors came, in the end, on a cold, clear night, and no one knew it was them until it was over, the way it always is. They ate the tasting menu. They ate my mother's rice lifted into art, and the dishes that had climbed the menu after it, all of it mine, all of it made right in the dark on 2 stools with 1 lamp burning. And weeks later, the letter came, and then the ceremony came. And that brings us back to the beginning, to the old customs hall under the chandeliers, and the judge at the front, and 3 long tables of journalists holding their pens. Because Lucienne had done the thing she said she had been doing all along, quietly, in every place a name can be put forward. When Cendre took its 3rd star, the story that went out with it was not the marriage of 2 great alphas. It was the story of a chef owner who had found, at the coldest station of her own kitchen, an omega-line cook with a dead mother's spoon, and a soul she could not cook herself, and who had spent a year making that cook's food worthy of the room and that cook's name impossible to bury. So when they read the name of the cook behind the dish that won Cendre its 3rd star, they read mine, Alba Reyes. And every face in that hall turned toward the back where the line cooks stand. And Lucienne did not turn, because Lucienne already knew. She only stood at the seat of honor with the pad of her thumb moving once along the spine of the carbon knife, and she looked at me down the whole length of that bright room the way she had looked at me across 3 steps over a bowl of rice a year before. And I did not lower my eyes. I stood at my full height in a borrowed jacket, chosen, named out loud in front of all of them. And I was not ashamed. It is a little over a year later now, as I tell you this. We run Cendre together, my name beside hers on the door now, the Omega-line cook and the Blade, which the press has never quite known what to do with, and which I have stopped caring whether they understand. But we did not keep it the cold blade of a place it was. On the pass, side by side, sit 2 spoons and 2 knives, her mother's carbon gyuto, dark and honed past reason, and my mother's dented tin tasting spoon, worn thin at the lip, the one thing an orphan owned before the world gave her anything else. Lucienne set them there herself, one evening, without a word, and when I asked her why, she said only that she had spent her whole life being told what was precious and what was not, and she had decided the 2 of them belonged in the same place. She still runs the pad of her thumb along the spine of that knife when a hard thing costs her. I still touch my mother's spoon to the corner of my mouth when my hands do not know what a dish needs. And often enough, now the answer is simply her. We have taught Pia to run a hot station. She is not terrified anymore, or not often. Odette still comes to the pass of an evening and pretends she has only come to check that we are not ruining her pastry, and stays an hour, and the 3 of us taste the night's menu from our worn spoons like people who have chosen each other out of a whole hard trade. And every night, when the last plate of the tasting menu is built and I set it on the pass for her to check before it goes to the room, Lucienne Marchand picks up her battered steel spoon, and she touches it to the corner of her mouth, and she tastes the food that was my mother's soul before it was ours. And she looks at me, in the lamplight, down the small distance that no longer needs holding, and she says the word that meant you failed for the first cold months, and meant keep going. I am still here through the long secret year, and means now the only thing it has ever really meant, which is do this beside me forever and let it cost what it costs. Again.